Welcome to This Is Money podcast. I'm Georgie Frost, and joining me and Lee Boyce today is Helen Crane. And coming up, forget 5%, forget 6, even 7.5%. A new saving account has landed, paying a whopping 9%. Yes, you heard me right, 9%. But as always, the devil is in the detail. Cash ISAs are back in vogue as record amounts gets poured into the tax-free accounts. But why? Lots of housing news this week. Prices fall, deals pulled left, right and centre, rates on the rise, and the amount borrowed in new mortgages dips to a new record low. Where is it all heading? Plus, tech giant Meta needs to listen to big banks and take the huge volume of scams more seriously, says our Lee. And the great dishes debate finally resolved. Is it cheaper to wash up by hand or use a dishwasher? Don't forget yourself up to date with the latest breaking money news. Just go to thisismoney.co.uk or download the app.
Don't forget, you can stay on top of what's going on in the markets by tuning in to the Digest and Invest podcast by eToro. Go to your regular podcast platform and listen on the go. Digest and Invest by eToro, the podcast for those interested in trading and investing.
But first, rising interest rates are causing all sorts of havoc on the mortgage market. More on that shortly. But one positive impact is on our savings. We're lucky enough to have any. Starved of decent interest for years, rates have climbed since the Bank of England started raising rates in December 2021. How excited we've been on the podcast when they breached 5% recently. Lee's getting all excited there. His face is getting ruddy. Imagine our delirium when a press release from Saffron Building Society landed in our inboxes boasting of 9% interest. He's shaking his head. He couldn't believe it. Yes, that is above the current rate of inflation, and it blows Skipton's 7.5% poultry offering out of the water. Bam, says Lee. Lee, Helen, wowee.
Can I just say, Georgie,
Should I build that up?
Yeah. He made me sound like Victor Meldrew there. I don't believe it.
If only we had a video camera, though, right now, and the listeners could see your... Honestly, Lee was getting very animated just then. But Lee, wowee.
Okay, before we get too excited, can I just point out here that
too late, Lee.
Our poor savings reporter, Ed Magnus, has honestly just had it up to his ears with rate rises and all sorts of things happening in the last couple of weeks. Yeah. So fair play to him.
Earning his crust.
Yeah, he really is.
Well done.
Ed, another savings rate story, 9%. And we're all in the office, 9%? Nah, what's the catch? And there is a catch. So there's been a couple of new regular savers that have launched this week. Now, I'm a massive
regular saver?
I'm a massive fan of regular savers. So basically, banks offer a certain kind of headline rate, typically looks way higher than an easy access rate or a fixed rate. But the caveat is you can only put a certain amount of money into them each month. But they are an absolutely fantastic place to start getting into the savings habit and a great place to snowball your cash and at the end of it have a lovely chunk of money that you go off and do something with. The one thing that these accounts you don't really want to think about too much or bank on too much is that you're going to get to the end of it and have a massive chunk of interest and you're going to go, what's going to happen is you're going to put a bit of money away each month. At the end, it's going to mature, you're going to get the interest and you're going to look at it and go, is that it? But that's kind of how these accounts work, even at 9%. So this Saffron one came hot on the heels of Skipton Building Society. So the Saffron 9% sounds great on paper. However, it's only available to its existing members, which is fine. It's a loyalty thing, but it doesn't have a huge amount of customers. It has about 100,000, something like that. It's still a sizable chunk. There's still 100,000 people who can go and open that account. But the other massive thing is you can only put £50 a month into this account. So that is a maximum of £600 over the course of the year. It's going to work out about £29 interest. So, better
than smack in the face with a wet fish.
Exactly. And that was hot on the heels of Skipton. Now, Skipton Building Society the last couple of months, I feel like it was just everywhere all of a sudden. We're all talking about Skipton. It's been launching mortgage products that have got the nation talking. And they've also launched a 7.5% regular saver this week. Now, again, sounds great on paper. It's only available to existing members. Now, Skipton's much bigger than Saffron. It's one of the bigger building societies, and it has 1 million members. So that's, way more people that can take advantage of that. And you could put in a way bigger £250 a month into this account. So that's £3,000 over the course of the year, which again, it's no bad deal. If you're someone that wants to get into the savings habit or just wants to tuck away a bit of money each month, there's no harm in having a regular saver. I've used them numerous times over the years. I find them good products to have. But there are some accounts out there that have lower headline interest that might be a better home for your cash if you're going to get a regular saver. So what I mean by that, First Direct has a 7% rate. It's had that for a good 6 months or so. I think it came out before Christmas. But you could put £300 a month away into that top. So if you could max that out, you'd actually end up with more interest over the course of the year than the Skipton one. And Lloyd's has a 6.25% regular saver, but you could put an even bigger amount in. You could put £400 a month in, and that would mean even more interest than the First Direct one and the Skipton one, just because you could put more money in. So you're going to end up with more interest. So there's been regular savers are a good product for banks and building societies to launch because they're very headline grabbing. You look at that and you go 9%. Wow, that's actually a first account that sounds like it beats inflation for God knows how long. But the devil is always in the detail of these things. But it is a kind of symptom of what's going on at the moment. Savings rates are really starting to climb again, and there's some good rates out there to be had.
Helen, I'm curious, talking about regular savings accounts, we see people switching the bank accounts to get bonuses. I switched my account, I didn't get a bonus, and the best that they offer in a savings rate is 3.25%. Do you think we're going to see more people moving because of these sorts of savings accounts on offer?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, as Lee said, with that Saffron account, it's only for their customers, existing customers. So unfortunately, you couldn't switch to them just to be able to use that account. But I do think people are getting a bit wiser to making their money work a bit harder. So we had another story this week about cash ISA season, which is period sort of from May to March, around the end of the tax year, when people tend to move their ISA money. 18 billion was put into tax-free accounts between March and April. The largest ever recorded in April alone, 11.9 billion. I think it does show that people are thinking a bit more about where to put their money, especially when costs are going up and interest rates are so high. People are being really pummeled on things like their weekly shop and their mortgage. And, most of these rates aren't beating inflation, but I think people are increasingly thinking, if I can just earn a little bit more on my savings, every little helps. I do think as well, banks are looking to attract people in more with these kinds of offers. If you look at Skipton, as we said, they launched this 100% mortgage a few weeks ago. That's going to cost them a lot of money to lend that mortgage to people. And they need to get savers in to be able to have that extra cash to lend out. So it kind of works both ways. And I think we are seeing that a lot of banks are quite keen for new customers, which is generally only a good thing for people with savings.
I want to delve a little bit more into the cash ISA bonanza, but before I get there, Lee, with interest rates expected to rise further, is it worth fixing? Should you hang around? Are we expecting savings? We keep asking if they peaked, and then no, they haven't.
I'm going to be completely frank, Georgia. I think it's just really too hard to predict, and I think that we keep sort of going around in circles with, is this the peak for fixes? And then they sort of dip a little bit and then they go back up again, and it's really hard to know. I would say at the moment, if you see a good savings deal, I would just take it. And if you're in somewhere where your money is just not working hard enough for you at all, just move it. I wouldn't be getting too het up between, is this definitely the peak? I mean, the difference between 5 and 5.5% isn't that massive. And to be honest, it's a certain cohort of people that will fix their money anyway. Typically, they've got big balances and they're looking to the future. It's money that they can lock away. The majority of people are looking for easy access because it's just money at hand, emergency money. You can get 3.82% now on an easy access, which is not a bad rate of return whatsoever. And actually £3,000, just to compare that to the Skipton regular saver, would mean £114 of interest on that top easy access rate. So you would actually end up with more interest over the year with that regular saver. So that regular saver is tipping the scales a little bit. But I think there are going to be potentially a bit more movement, especially in easy access. So I just heard this morning from HSBC that from next week, the 8th of June, for example, it has an online bonus saver, and that's going up to 4% on the first £10,000 of money that's saved, and then over 10 grand, it's a lower and I think it's 2.3%. So there's rates out there. Even banks are getting involved, and circling back into the cash ISA stuff. I was quite blown away when I saw that this week. I knew that the cash ISA season was back with a bang this year. It was quite clear that there was a lot of appetite for people to
Why
open
is that,
tax
Lee?
accounts.
Just explain what's so appealing about cash ISA. Why now in particular? Because it was sat there, the humble ISA, lonely in the corner, forgotten, discarded, shunned, even. But now it's back.
If it was a piggy bank photo shoot, it would have all like cobwebs on it, and it'd be sitting there just sort of like waiting for someone to come and clean it up.
Please
and
love me. It's the bear on the top shelf, you know.
Exactly, it is a bit like that. And you know, I'm a big fan of a cash ISA, and you know, I've been waiting patiently all these years where I've gone greyer, fatter, balder, you know, waiting for another cash ISA season to roll around. And we got it, and it's come back with a bang. And there's a couple of things at play here. I mean, first of all, as we've always said on this podcast, cash ISAs are a vital tool for people to put money away and shield their money from the taxman. And the bigger balance that you build up in these cash ISAs, the more important that becomes. And I would say, especially for a higher rate and additional rate taxpayers. I mean, to have a cash ISA. And in fact, any ISA, stocks and shares ISA, having it away from the taxman £20,000 a year is an incredibly good deal. Now, the majority of people are not going to max out £20,000 a year on their cash ISA or stocks and shares ISA. However, what is happening and what's at play here is that for the first time in, a long time, since the Personal Savings Allowance came out, the Personal Savings Allowance allows you to earn £1,000 of savings interest if you're a basic rate taxpayer, £500 of interest if you're a higher rate taxpayer. Where rates have started to nudge higher, more people are potentially facing a tax bill on their savings, and potentially for the first time. And so just to give you an example of this, right, a basic rate taxpayer would have needed £200,000 in an account to reach £1,000 interest level early last year on the Best Buy Easy Access of 0.5%, right? And it would £100,000 interest, £100,000 pot for someone with who's a higher rate taxpayer. Now with a Best Buy of 3.82%, you'll hit that at 26 grand. So a pot of cash at 26 grand as a basic rate taxpayer, but just £13,000. I say just, but £13,000 as a higher rate taxpayer. Those levels have come down drastically. It's put cash ISAs like way more into focus. Rates have been improving on cash ISAs as well. They're typically never as good as non-ISA accounts, and there's a couple of reasons again for that. The main one being is competition. There's quite a lot of smaller players that just don't get involved in ISAs because of the red tape that's involved. It's a lot more complicated to have an ISA product, so they typically pay sort of 0.2 to 0.5 percentage points less than just an ordinary account. So the Best Buy cash ISA, I think, is around about, I'll tell you actually, it's 3.65% starter savings, so a little bit lower than the 3.82%. It gets a little bit bigger on fixed rates. So for example, for best 1 year, it's 4.51%. Now, from this week, you can get a 1 year fix for 5.25%. And there's quite a lot of accounts that have launched this week that have gone between 5 and 5.25% on a 1 year fix. It sounds great on paper, but it's still quite below inflation. But, the gap between inflation, where inflation has come down a little bit, savings rates are nudging up a bit, that gap is starting to shrink a little bit. I think people have finally, in the last 6 months, the year, have gone, there's actually good rates out there again now.
Worth moving around.
I'm going to start moving it around. And I think that's what's happened. I mean, £18 billion in 2 months. That's a huge amount to be going into cash ISAs. Huge, massive. I would never have predicted it to be that big. But the simple fact is there was more decent rates. People were more conscious about shielding their money from the tax man. And it's been a perfect storm for the ISA. It wasn't like the old days that, there wasn't like loads of new offerings coming out and like banks trying to, go above each other in the cash. It was even in the tables. It was more of a kind of steady flow of just there were some good rates that came out there, and there was lots of options, and people have just gone for it.
Yeah, indeed, they have, Helen. They've just gone for it. I don't know if you know this, Helen, but sort of delving into the figures there, is this new money? Is it money moved from other savings accounts? Is it money that in the past perhaps would have been spent on investing? I mean, have we seen how much money is going into stocks and shares ISAs, for example? I don't know if you know this, but what's your gut instinct if you don't know?
Yeah, it's not exactly clear where the money is coming from, but I would say there's possibly a fair amount being moved from normal savings accounts into ISAs because of, as Lee said, more people being at risk of breaching that savings allowance. Definitely could be money coming out of investing. I mean, there's the old theory that you should sell your investments in May and then come back at the end of the summer to avoid like losing money. Could be partly that. Could be people just seeing things kind of taking a bit of a turn maybe on their investments and deciding to lock the money away somewhere a bit safer. And, you know, also the thing we haven't mentioned is that a lot of people still have those big like pots of money, people who were lucky enough to like work through the pandemic and build up a lot of savings. You know, some of that money is still hanging around. And if you've been building on that since then you might be getting to the stage where you're maybe busting past the £20,000 a year allowance. So yeah, it could be coming from a variety of different sources, really, but definitely seems like people are, thinking a bit more about where they're putting their savings and stashing a bit more away.
Indeed. Right, let's move on from savings. It's been rather weak as well for housing market related news. House prices saw the biggest drop in May since July 2009. Rates are heading upwards, fixed deals are being pulled left, right and centre, and the amount borrowed in new mortgages dipped in April to a new record low. Add it all together, shake it all about a bit, and what, Lee Boyce, do you get? What does it all mean? Let's begin with house prices.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a mixed bag, hasn't it? The house price indexes so far this year. There's kind of been a bit of up, a bit of down, a bit away. We're not too sure what's going on here, type thing. And obviously, after on the back of the mini budget in September, which we've spent far too many column inches and far too much words on podcasts talking about, we've seen mortgage rates just going far higher, and it is a conversation that is just going on up and down the country, whether you're someone about to buy a home, a homeowner looking to remortgage, a homeowner looking to move. All of these things, when you're then crunching the figures to see how much your new mortgage might be in any of those circumstances, the reality is, the likelihood is it's going to be quite a bit higher than it would have been this time last year. You filter all that through for the cost of living, the inflation stuff. There is the kind of, you could see why experts were saying house prices are going to fall 10% this year. I mean, that was quite a kind of, one of those things where people just stick their neck on the line and just come out of a figure. And it's a figure that I think is just absolutely impossible to really figure out. The property market in this country is complex. Yeah. It's an unwieldy beast. From one week to the next, sometimes I've got absolutely no idea what's really going on. But we have the nationwide house price index this week. I would say it's one of the big indexes alongside Halifax and the ONS, the ones that you sort of really look up and stand up and take notice of. And they're saying that property values fell 3.4% in May annually. And that's the biggest fall since 6.2% in July 2009, when we were coming out of the tunnel of doom from the financial crisis. That's, again, big headline figure. I keep seeing stuff about 14 years. It's everything seems to be getting in comparison to 2009 at the moment. Average property, £260,736, according to Nationwide. On a monthly basis, down 0.1%. Reading between the lines on this, I would say that we're coming out of at the end of some absolutely staggering house price growth. And we've said this time and time again on the podcast. I mean, from the pandemic, when everything with a big pause button was hit and we had no idea what was going to happen with basically anything, including house prices, it just rode out the storm. And then sort of from that summer onwards, it's just gone crackers up until sort of recently. So, we're coming out at the end of that, and I don't think you can just keep having house prices that just keep going up and up and up and up and up every year. There's other factors that play in, things going on, the removal of certain buying schemes, stamp duty holidays, all sorts of things that just sort of get thrown out there that really do have a huge impact on house prices. And the one that's really having an impact at the moment, I would argue, is the higher mortgage rates and people looking at huge sums of money and then crunching how much a mortgage is going to cost from a 1.5% to 2% mortgage rate to a now probably more like 5 to 6%, and going, "Cool, that's a big monthly payment. I'm not sure we can really move, or I'm not really sure we can buy," and that's just filtering through. But that said, there is still demand. People are still buying homes. The world is still spinning. House price falls haven't been as drastic as what was probably first forecast, but there's still half a year to go. I mean, what can happen in half a year, Georgie?
What a good question, Lee. A good question.
and I'll tell you what, I'm making zero predictions, and I'm not telling you what I think is going to happen to house prices between now and the end of the year. They're going to go from, they're either going to drop, they're going to drop from somewhere from 20%, or they're going to rise by 20%, somewhere in between.
Like it, Lee. All right.
Is that a big enough range?
As you pass the hospital pass to Helen there, who has to answer that one. Helen, Lee makes a good point there. Look, I was listening to a podcast the other day talking about house price rises, 20%. They've gone up since the pandemic. Rentals, 25%. I mean, wow. So 3.4% drop. Well, I mean, if you're a first-time buyer and you're looking at rates go up, what were they a year ago? About 3 point something. Now you're over 5%.
Yeah, the house price rises in the last few years, as you said, have been huge. And I do definitely think the thing that we need to worry about here is higher mortgage rates, not house prices potentially falling, because rates are getting so high. I mean, compared to where they were before the mini budget, which we still always refer to, which kind of sent them soaring, they've roughly doubled mortgage interest rates. So at the minute, a typical 2-year fix, the average rate is 5.38%. A year or so ago, that was about half that, about 2.5%. So it's a really big rise. You know, people who are having to remortgage are seeing hundreds of pounds, sometimes a month extra on their payments. So it is a real barrier for people either getting on the property ladder or moving. And it seems like rates are starting to tick up a little bit again just in the last week or so. You know, we saw them really spike at the start of the year, and they've kind of been gradually trickling down. Now it seems like they're going up a little bit again. So we've had, in the last week or so, Nationwide have put up their rates, a whole kind of list of lenders, really. Coventry Building Society, Accord, they've pulled their rates and they're going to presumably bring them back at a higher level. Halifax have done it as well. So we are seeing rates kind of come up again, and that's mainly because of the predictions around the base rate and inflation being a bit more kind of sticking around for a bit longer than we initially expected. So banks are seeing the Bank of England maybe looking to take the base rate to 5.5% eventually, and they're thinking, well, we're going to have to factor that in, and they're kind of putting their rates up now in anticipation of that. So it's looking like things won't get back to normal for maybe longer than we thought. That is clearly having an impact on the housing market. So we had some mortgage borrowing figures out this week as well. Mortgage approvals for house purchases dropped in April, and net borrowing, which is the net amount that people take out against new mortgages, fell to the lowest level outside of the pandemic. That's since they started taking the data in 1993. Net mortgage borrowing actually fell into negative territory. So there was 1.4 billion of net repayments. In March, it was net zero. So repayments and new money taken out, like, roughly evened out. But now more people are spending more repaying mortgages than they are taking out new mortgages, which I think really kind of shows people's kind of reticence to buy or move, because people just, you know, the rates are high, and I think people are just kind of worried about what's going on. It's hard to see where things are going.
I was going to say, what do those figures really represent? I mean, house price drop, that's sort of obvious, you know, mortgages being pulled. But in terms of the amount of borrowed and new mortgages, is that people are being rejected, or are they just not going for it?
It'll be people not taking out new mortgages at the same sort of levels that they were before, because mortgages are getting more expensive. People are having to pay more to service the mortgage. And actually, just going back to something that Helen said there about things going back to normal, I had a really good conversation with one of my close friends last night, and he was talking about basically buying a new home. And he said to me, about mortgage rates, and he said, when are things going to get back to normal? And I said, but what you've got to realise is that going back to normal for our generation is that we have just come off of the back of absolute rock bottom interest rates. We've had base rate that fell to 0.1%. It's absolutely unheard of. 0.25% for quite a while, 0.5%. Mortgages have never been cheaper, and we have been weaned on a diet, generation that have bought a home between the financial crisis and the pandemic, of rock bottom mortgage rates. Before that, this was the normal, and then before that, people had mortgage rates in double digits. So what is normal? It's really hard. Is this normal? I mean, you could argue that the rates that are now coming out and base rate at hovering around 5%, which is probably now on the sort of long-term average in history, is that the normal? And are we just so used to paying such cheap mortgage rates? And will we ever see them ever again? I mean, that is a loaded, massive question that I'm definitely not tackling. And now I'm going to put myself on mute and disappear.
All right, then. That's it for part one.
I'm joined now by Sam North of eToro for our weekly look at what's been going on in the markets. Sam, how's the past week been?
Yeah, interesting. There was always going to be three things for us to keep a focus on this week. One was the debt ceiling. Two was the US jobs report. And three was really whether AI can still send stocks higher. Firstly, the US Senate approved debt deal, and along with some weaker ISM data, we actually then saw the Fed June hike odds move considerably lower. So that supported markets. However, number two, the jobs report showed the US economy created a huge 339,000 jobs. That was higher than expected, surging from the prior month. And really this sort of shocked markets as we were looking for a full month on month. So this should now delay the economic slowdown, but only stokes inflation worries, and maybe suggest the Fed are actually going to need to raise interest rates more. Thirdly, Nvidia became the 9th company to reach a $1 trillion market cap as it opened on Tuesday. It's since then moved a little bit lower, but still interesting nonetheless. Is this the start of an AI-fueled bubble, or is this going to be the reason for the next bull run? Let's wait and see.
£1 trillion is an incredible number, isn't it? What have we got to look forward to next week?
Yeah, typically after a US jobs report, the Monday and Tuesday are really quiet. It almost acts as a monthly reset for markets, and then we go again. And on paper, the rest of the week is actually pretty quiet too. We got policy announcements from the RBA and the Bank of Canada, so maybe they would top the bill. We've also got Eurozone retail sales and Chinese inflation. That could also provide some headlines. But I'm almost tempted to say I wouldn't really mind skipping next week and just getting to the next one where we've got US inflation and then the next monetary policy decision from the Fed. From a UK standpoint, it's similar to the US. Next week's quiet, but the week after is more interesting as we get the latest jobs report from the UK and also GDP. So relatively quiet next week, but really busy and interesting the week after.
Thank you very much. That's Sam North from eToro.
Thank you, Lee.
Welcome back. As Lloyds Bank becomes the latest bank to come out and blast the owner of Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp on the volume of scams going on there, Lee Boyce says it's time for tech giant Meta to listen to the big banks and take social media scams more seriously. Lee, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll go you back to November, and I was at one of these kind of editor dinners that sometimes get thrown out there with a bank that I can't name because of Chatham House rules and all that kind of stuff. I sat next to some real bigwigs from this bank, including the head of fraud, and I was saying to him, what's kind of happening, what's the latest stuff, and it was just the torch paper that basically was lit about how the majority of scams were coming from Meta-owned platforms. So Facebook, especially Facebook Marketplace, Instagram, WhatsApp, and we've seen the WhatsApp mum and dad scam that's been reported a lot. And I was sort of trying to get under the skin of trying to push and probe how many, and he came out of basically the majority, sort of 4 in 5 of all scams, and I was quite blown away by that. I kind of knew obviously scams originate from those kind of platforms, but that is massive. And he described it to me as very high volume fraud that rakes in quite low amounts compared to something like investment fraud, which is very, very low volume. But if a scammer manages to hook someone in, it's a massive reward. You know, they can end up with tens of thousands of pounds. So, but because of the sheer level and the sheer volume, they were directing so many resources trying to sort people's problems out from these platforms, and that basically it just blasted Meta and said that they're just not doing enough. Now,
Lee, can I just jump in very quickly
go
there?
for it.
Thanks, Lee. Because I'm a bit confused. Is it the fact that this is Meta to blame? They're not looking after, you know, what they should be doing and monitoring this, or is it the fact that Meta controls so much of that social media space? Is this an issue? And I'm going down a bit of a path here, but for the competitions watchdog to take a look at this and say, actually, look, if you're not going to be able to do your job, you shouldn't have this much space.
Well, I mean, yeah, that is a massive topic to tackle.
Sorry about that.
Can
I just jump in here with a quick question?
Yeah,
quick question.
Yeah. Something that's so massive that it's completely impossible to comprehend type question. No, I know, I get exactly what you mean. And I think that, you know, we had the government coming out, a month or so ago talking about tougher new measures on financial fraud because it's become such a massive blight to society. And it's something that we have been beating the drum about for so long, and it's been a slow-moving car crash. You know, I feel like so much scams and frauds could have been prevented if it had just been taken more seriously a long time ago, and there was more task force and there was more things going on behind the scenes, to now the point where such a large chunk of crime in Britain is fraud that it's almost unbelievable to really truly understand the scale. Now, from the back of this chat that I had, obviously I wasn't allowed to go away and report on it because, you know, all of the rules around it and all that kind of stuff. But we built a story around it, and we were given a story in sort of, well, not given a story, we worked hard to get a story where we spoke to lots of different banks. Some of them are more vocal than others, basically saying that Facebook Marketplace had become the Wild West of the internet, essentially. And I can testify for this because 4 or 5 years ago, I was selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace. It was really easy. People said, yeah, I want to buy it. Came around and gave me some cash. About a year or so ago, it had taken a really darker turn. And basically people were, I put an item up and you'd get about 10 messages within about 10 minutes, all sort of scam links and all sorts of weird stuff. And some of it looked quite genuine. So, for example, I put up a set of IKEA cabinet drawers, and someone sent me a message saying, I really want to buy these, but are they the same ones as these? And then put a link. And I almost clicked it, almost just to go and check that they were the same ones, because that's not outside the realms of like. And then I took a breath and was like, don't click on that link. What is it? And then sort of hovered it over it, and it was quite clearly a phishing attempt. But it looked so genuine, and you can see how these things unfold. So anyway, fast forward to recently, we had that story. We've now started to get big banks actually just say, do you know what? I think they've had enough. I think they've just gone, Meta's just not doing enough, and we need to call them out for it. So fair play. TSB, a few weeks ago, boss came out and said, it's absolutely, you know, ridiculous how many level of scams that's coming from Meta. What's going to be done about it? Then we've had Lloyd's last week. The banks are getting fed up of it. The banks are always, you know, I don't have a huge degree of sympathy with the banks, you know, on the whole. But when it comes to fraud, they don't want to see their customers getting scammed. You know, it costs millions of pounds to refund people. And, you know, we have this argument all the time about how much, you know, people's like, should people be refunded? You know, are people taking enough care? In some circumstances, you could argue the kind of, you shouldn't have fallen for that. But in lots of cases, you can kind of argue, you can see how they've fallen for that. But they're always on the hook. And it almost feels like, okay, so what are Meta doing? And I kind of feel like if Meta were on the hook for refunding customers, or at least partially refunding customers that have fallen victim on their platforms for scams that are really quite hard to detect, and you can see how people are falling for them, maybe it would sharpen the focus a little bit more. All I can say is more has to be done. It just simply more has to be done. And I know the government's come out and said all this stuff, but you know what it's like when these things get announced. It's like, you know, it'd be like 6 months and then a year's gone by, and then you're like, what's actually been done? And like hardly anything's been done. We need action now. We need Meta to start pulling up their socks and saying, do you know what? How do we detect more of this and stop all of this at source, instead of letting it go all the way down the line in which someone loses their money and then the bank's on the hook, and it costs you, I, Helen, everyone in this country money because we're having to refund people that are falling victim from it all filters down somewhere.
Here, Lee. Here. I'm slightly less sympathetic about the banks, but I do think with, I don't know about the sort of demise of humanity, but with AI round the corner, these scams are going to just get more and more sophisticated, more common. Banks are going more and more online very quickly. If they can't even get the house, all of them, this is not just having a back course, like Meta and those sorts of businesses, they need to sort it out, because there is something big coming down the line and we can't even get our house in order now.
And that's it, Georgie. You're totally right. That's a nail on the head. That is the next kind of big threat. I think that AI-led scam attempts are going to become a real hot thing in the next couple of years. Of course, we're talking about it now, right at sort of like ground zero, and it will be years before something will be done about it and it'll be cottoned on. But we won't go too much down the AI rabbit hole. But if you can mimic someone's voice within a couple of seconds, and you can do this, that, and the other with it, all of a sudden scams go from not really that sophisticated to potentially really quite sophisticated. What stops the mum and dad scam becoming the mum and dad scam where someone's actually mimicked your child's voice? And then, it starts to get a little bit crazy. We're going a little bit Terminator RoboCop on this.
I don't think we're a million miles away from there.
But it's not outside the realms of possibility. And actually, it is something we're kind of looking into at the moment, where we're kind of asking, we're asking the banks, is this the next big threat, and what are they going to do about it? So watch this space.
I was about to say that. Helen, you're sort of nodding along there.
Yeah, well, I was talking to a scam kind of expert the other day, and he was talking about these AI scams and saying that there was a potential for someone to dupe like your child's voice and pretend they're being kidnapped. I mean, it's terrifying.
God, how awful.
Absolutely terrifying. I just think with this whole thing, the banks generally have been quite good at refunding people when they get scammed. I mean, almost because they can't not, it would be terrible PR for a bank to turn around to a little old lady who's being scammed and say, no, we won't return you your £200. Like, they kind of don't have a choice. But it just seems like maybe, rightly, the focus often is on getting customers individually their money back. And that's obviously a lot of what we do. But why aren't we hearing more about scammers being exposed, the police getting hold of rings of scammers? What where are those stories? It doesn't seem like there's a lot being done to actually tackle it from the actually find these scammers and take them down.
Yeah, and what annoys me as well about the sort of the big tech companies is that they don't speak to the press that much. I just don't. Am I right in saying that? I just feel like you get a little bit of a press release and that's it, if you're lucky. It's this kind of closed shop. We don't really know what's going on, and I just think, God, the amount of information, data, the power that they hold, and who's holding them to account? But anyway, because we can't. Anyway, right. Helen, you did mention there about getting readers' money back. We are midway through 2023. I imagine more of these sort of cases will be for Crane on the case going forward, but you have been on the case fighting battles. Indeed, since the whole thing started back in November 2020, goodness me, has it been that long? This is Money and Helen have helped claw back over £1 million for readers. So let's take a biannual checkup, shall we? Helen, firstly, breaching the 1 million mark. Woo-wee!
Yeah, 1.07 million, actually, if you want to count the full number. Yeah, it's something we're kind of quite proud of at This Is Money. Obviously, we started it a couple of years ago, and it's been really great just to hear from readers about the kind of issues that they're experiencing. We absolutely love when people write in and tell us, stories both good and bad. Obviously, it is sadly largely when things have gone wrong that they get in touch with us. Yeah, I mean, we've covered all manner of things. As we were just talking about, sadly, a lot of people getting scammed. We've managed to get money back for all kinds of other things, banks wrongly charging people with problems with their mortgages, taxes, almost anything money related. We'll be happy to look into it. And yeah, it can be so interesting, just dig into sometimes the most kind of obscure problems that people write in with end up being the most interesting to dig into. So yeah, if anyone listening has had any problems with bank, retailer, any kind of financial firm, do drop me a line.
Before we get into some specific cases this year, certainly, generally, how are you noticing 2023 to previous Are you getting more complaints? Are you getting more similar kind of complaints? Are people just a bit more savvy about trying to get their money back? Because times are tough.
Yeah, I would say one thing I've noticed, I definitely get a lot fewer positive stories from people. When the column first started, we used to try and do one bad story and then maybe one or two good stories, people who've written in to praise a company that's kind of given them good service. And I've noticed a real drop off in the number of people wanting to say nice things about companies. I don't know if that's because financial firms are on the whole getting much worse. I mean, maybe that's true, but I think it's more, in this environment where people are feeling quite squeezed financially, they're less likely to want to give any praise to a company who's taking more of their hard-earned money. I think companies need to work harder to encourage customers to give them a positive review. I think, do still get some really nice ones, but I think people are just less inclined to say, oh yeah, really, really like this company, when at the end of the day, they're just taking more money that they don't really have.
That's another thing I've noticed from the inboxes that we have where readers can write in, is essentially it's gone from a lot of complaints about the travel industry and problems getting money back from, COVID hit plans and all that kind of stuff. We still get a trickle of them. Even 3 years later, we're still getting travel pandemic stuff. Nowhere near in the same scale now. It's been all completely replaced by energy firms. Pretty much there's a lot of energy firm problems out there, mad billing, problems, getting through to customer services, not having the government vouchers, and what happens is something where prices of energy, for example, have become so high, it becomes in sharper focus. So it becomes like the thing that people want to complain about, and people are just way more likely to, want to write in with complaints and things that we're going to try and solve for them rather than praising companies. And that's just the way we are as humans, I think. How often have you ever left a positive review on something? I always think about it. So I had a lovely time at this hotel and I should probably
do all the time.
I just don't.
What I don't leave is average reviews.
This hotel was
all right.
Yeah, but that's quite helpful. That's quite helpful for me.
It looks the most helpful because I always cut out the top ones, cut out the really bottom ones, and then just read the ones in the middle. But who writes the ones in the middle? Not me. But I got really into it because I'm a local hero or something on Google because
you're one of those, Georgie. Oh, I didn't know
because I use it so much. I know
you're a local hero. Oh, I didn't. I always wondered if I'd ever meet those people. And now I have. You're a local hero.
I am a hero.
Oh my goodness, you've got too much time on your hands.
I'm trying to do a service for the good of the people there. Helen, right, talking about services for the good of the people, some standout cases this year.
Yeah, so one I wanted to mention from just a couple of weeks ago actually is someone wrote in to say that a company had registered themselves on Companies House, so it's appearing on the website, with his address, his home address. He had absolutely nothing to do with this company, had never heard of them, never heard from anyone for that company, but he started getting letters for them and then realised that his address was linked to this company on a public website. Obviously, quite a big issue. And it was just so interesting to look into because it became
a really big story, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It was a company, the director was based in China, and a lot of other people have got in touch with me since actually saying that the same thing has happened to them. Difficult to know what's going on with them, but they're basically registering their companies at randomly picked UK addresses, it seems, whether it's for kind of nefarious tax and, registration reasons could be, or, do they just think it makes them look more legit to have an address in the UK? We don't know. I mean, it kind of sounds quite almost like funny on the surface, but when you think about it, if your address is listed, what's to say some disgruntled supplier or like an annoyed customer wouldn't just turn up at your house thinking that it's this person's office? And then there's, potential problems with your credit score to think of as well. So it is actually quite serious. And yeah, it's turned out that this is happening to a lot of people. I mean, it seems mad that you can just do this with no check. You don't need to provide any proof of address. You can just say, yeah, this is my address. And then the annoying thing is the burden is then on the people who have had their address wrongly used to prove that they actually live there, which just seems like absolute madness. So I should say, actually, we managed to get that sorted for that reader and get his address removed from the register. So that was good. Another one what I wanted to mention, and this is the one that really ticked us over that all-important 1 million mark. It's a reader who wrote in, and kind of a dream scenario, really, or at least you'd think on the surface. Her and her relatives had been contacted by a company of heir hunters. So these are people who track down relatives of people who've died without a will, with sadly no other relatives to kind of leave their money to. So they're distant relatives, and they call them and say, you're going to inherit basically this person's house and their savings after they died. A complete surprise. They didn't know this person, kind of tinged with sadness, actually, because this person was essentially like an illegitimate child of one of their uncles, and they never knew him while he was alive, and sadly he's died without anyone to pass his money on to. But obviously a nice surprise for them, in that they're in for a big whack of cash. But that happened a couple of years ago, and they never heard any more about the money. The firm of heir hunters saying, yeah, it's coming, and then saying, oh, it's in the hands of HMRC, it's going to be sorted. But it basically kind of went on for years, and a couple of the people in this group of relatives were having some sort of financial problems. One of them had been made redundant, so one of them going to a care home and needed to pay that. So there was kind of a need for the money if it was coming. It turns out it's just huge backlogs with HMRC. This is something that kind of can't be necessarily sped up, like just massive backlogs in the government kind of admin system. But when I spoke to the heir hunters again, I kind of said, is there anything you can do for these people they could really do with the money? And they managed to go to the solicitors on the estate and get them to pay out what's called an interim payment. So there's certain situations where you can pay out a chunk of what's owed before it's all kind of signed off with HMRC. They paid them £300,000
Wow.
within about a week of me calling them, and that was split between the relatives. So big result, and to be honest, not one I was hugely expecting. I thought it was going to be a story where I go to HMRC and I say, oh yeah, sorry, there's delays, not much we can do. But quite a nice result.
That wasn't where I was expecting you to go with that as well. When you said they were contacted by heir hunters, I thought, well, first of all, I was like, do you think you get a free holiday or something? But then you meant the heir, that type of heir, and I thought, this is going to be a scam. It's going to be awful.
I think they thought it was a scam at first.
Yeah.
Definitely had to. It's one you double check, isn't it, before getting in touch with them.
The voice?
I was going to say the one that Helen did this week as well. First of all, actually, before I wade into this, I say it's a real kind of difficult job. Helen receives lots of emails. It's really hard to investigate absolutely everything. You meet many dead ends. There's constant pushback from companies that want various permissions. They want all kinds of manner of customer numbers and all that kind of thing. Now, if you want to write into helen.crane@thisismoney.co.uk, a couple of tips I would have for you is, number one, bullet point in chronological order of your problem and what's going on. Customer numbers and all that kind of stuff, addresses, anything we're going to need for the company to identify you, and always to sign it off with, I give Helen Crane permission to speak to whichever company it is on my behalf. Now, they're just the real golden ticket things. As a journalist, when we receive these things, and we're getting a lot of these things, that we just go, God, that makes my life so much easier. So that's the first thing. Second thing I'm going to say is, this week, Helen's done a piece about OVO Energy. So people that have been moved over from SSC to OVO from the takeover are finding basically mind-boggling bills, as Helen put it in the headline, which I love that, mind-boggling, just a term I like. And Helen was sitting there with the bill, trying to crunch it all. The reader was just completely baffled by it. Helen's baffled by it. Helen's thumping that calculator, trying to figure it all out. It's almost impossible. In fact, it isn't almost impossible. It is impossible. So, naturally, you go to OVO. We're giving some really kind of pretty rubbish response. We still can't work out this bill, but we've got a resolution. It's sorted. But this is the power of this kind of thing. Since then, 70 emails, the same story, pretty much. People that have got baffling bills after moving over to OVO. So sometimes the power of this column is people power. You kind of report on a story, you write a story like this, or write someone's problem like this, and it's just the tip of an iceberg, and all of a sudden it just it completely turns into something else and something bigger. I mean, there has to be something going on if within 24 hours of publishing the story, you're getting loads of people saying the same thing, and they can't work out their bill when they've got the same kind of issues as what's being reported on. And to be honest, it's quite satisfying. I would argue. I don't do Helen's job, but I imagine,
But you've been doing something similar for the whole of your career, Lee.
When you help out people, this is what makes this profession, the best, in my opinion.
You're not a local hero, Lee, but you're a hero in my book.
The whole team, it's David versus Goliath stuff. It's kind of a person who is struggling to read an energy bill, and your first glance is, I bet it's easy, and then you kind of, I'm a personal finance journalist, I'll get my calculator out, and I bet it's just a load of nonsense. Then you do it, and you go, my word, like, what is this all about? And then voila, it's like a massive story where lots of people are struggling, and that is the beauty. You just don't know. And that's why I always say in this job, it's the readers that make it. It's the people that write in with their interesting cases. God, I'm getting really emotional.
No,
but you know what I mean.
I do.
Please always write in. We always want to hear from you. Always.
Right, finally, we're not over yet, but the great dishwasher debate might be. Is it cheaper to wash up by hand or to use a dishwasher? This is Money put it to the test and found one is the clear winner, costing just half as much. Lee, you're giggling there.
It's just the way you built it up, like it was like the plot of a movie,
Lee, I mean, it's all in the way you tell it, no? Come on.
Dishwasher versus sink. What's the cheapest this summer? Actually, do you know what, Georgie? I was wondering this last year because our old dishwasher packed up, so we got a new one, and I went for a
horror.
The horror. Oh, the dishwasher's gone. Oh my goodness me, I'm gonna have to wash up. But actually, to be fair, we are in one of these households where we have a toddler. We have a lot of dishes and stuff going in. It's a necessity, Georgie.
Yeah. I live on my own. It's a necessity.
Actually, this is part of the response I'm going to give you. Yeah. So I went for the most energy efficient one I could find. Did that. Unpacked it all. Someone come and installed it. Had the installation guide, and I always think with these, like, whether it's a dishwasher or washing machine or whatever, it always has like an eco button. And I'm always like, is it really going to save me money if I press this eco button? And I was looking, and what I couldn't get my head around was like the eco version is something like a 4-hour.
Yeah, it lasts so much longer.
But then like an intensive, which is about 10 degrees more or something, it's like an hour and a half. And I'm like, well, time over this eco thing that might save me a pence or something. I don't know. I tried to figure it all out. I had the brochure, I had the kind of wattage. I was like crunching all the figures, and then I just realised that I was being quite pathetic, and that I should just use whatever setting that I.
Yeah. It's supposed to be good for the planet as well, don't they?
Well, but also in the bump, it really, really, really attacked sinks. It was not happy with sinks. This dishwasher company, who I won't name, were basically made it out in this, but I wish I kept it, this leaflet just saying how environmentally friendly it was to use the dishwasher and how it was bad to use the sink. And I thought you would say that, dishwasher people. You know, what you've got a vested interest in this.
Yeah.
So we've gone out, we've crunched it. The dishwasher's cheaper than the sink by quite a lot.
Really?
Yeah. So it costs 26p a day to put a dishwasher on. It would cost 48p to run a hot tap in the same time, fill up a sink and do your washing up in a sink. But it depends on the size of your household. If you're someone who lives by themselves, you're probably likely going to put the dishwasher on once a week, or you just wash up a couple of dishes as you go along. It's going to be nominal, if I'm going to be honest. If you're a bit of a busy family household, probably dishwasher's going to make a lot more sense, especially if you're getting distracted by kids running around. You got the hot tap running, you got this, that, and the other going on. And then the other debate that always goes on, and we have this in this house especially, dishwasher wars, Georgie. I mean,
big.
One day, we're all going to be in this house and know how to load the dishwasher properly. I'm going to make it my aim.
It's a thing.
It is a thing. Oh, yeah. I mean, you just get old and grumpy and go, why aren't you putting that dish there? Oh, it's massive. And the other massive thing, scraping the plates. Oh, man. If I see another plate going out dishwasher with stuff on the plate, I'm not going to be happy. Just scrape it into the bin. You don't need hot tap. Just scrape the stuff into the bin, and then you just put it in the dishwasher, right? I'm not like, am I going crazy? Is that just normal behaviour?
I scrape the food off, but I'm not like one of these people that like rinse it and wash it and then put it in the dishwasher.
No, you're not going to rinse.
What's
That's why you
the
put it
point
in
in
the
that?
dishwasher. Yeah, that's why you put it in the dishwasher.
Helen,
But, I mean,
get involved in the debate.
You're scraping the stuff off, like you're not letting that go in the dishwasher and into the tube. And then what will happen? Which is
clean
what
it out.
happens.
It's dirt.
Oh my word! A couple of years
smell.
ago, I had to clear out the pipe of the dishwasher because a certain person in the household wasn't scraping the food off the plates, and that is more important than how much it costs to run a dishwasher versus sink. And that's all I've got to say about that, Georgie.
Okay. Helen?
I don't have a dishwasher.
Oh.
So, no stake in this game.
Nothing to add there. I also think that it's got sort of how thorough you are at washing up. I'll be honest, there's times with a mug, just give it a wee rinse. It's fine. You don't need to do any more than that, do you?
Not really, exactly. And that's the thing. But in this research that we've done, an average dishwasher uses 10 litres of water in a cycle, right? So that's the way to really think about it. If you've got a sink and you've got a tub in a sink, quite a lot of people do that. I don't have that. But when you have like a plastic tub in a sink, you want to fill it up and then wash up stuff.
Helen's the expert on this, but yeah.
And how big is that tub? It's not going to be 10 litres, I wouldn't have thought.
Do you have a tub, Helen?
I do have a tub. I would estimate maybe a solid 4 litres. I don't know. I have no idea.
And do you let the tap run the whole time?
I do try not to let my tap run. The thing is that you've also got the rinsing issue with the sink, right? Because you have to, otherwise your bowl of water's dirty. If you're not rinsing your plates first, your bowl of water's dirty after 2 plates.
Exactly.
You could consider if you're someone that doesn't have a dishwasher or isn't that keen on using a dishwasher, the advice from the Energy Saving Trust is that you should always use a bowl. So I'm in the bad books for not using a bowl. All I do use my dishwasher pretty much all the time. And you could consider fitting an aerator onto your kitchen tap. They're like little devices that have holes in, and basically you put it on the spout of the tap and it adds airflow to water, so it kind of uses less water. Energy Saving Trust is saying that could save you £30 a year on your energy bills, but I don't know how much an aerator costs the outlay. I'm guessing it's not that expensive. No. But I guess it's just one of those things where...
What about paper plates? I know it's not good for
no, Georgie, that's the worst. No, don't go.
I've taken the conversation to real dirt. I'm so sorry.
No, I'm sure that
I brought it right down there, haven't I?
They could be recycled. It's fine. I think the real nub of this story is if you've got a dishwasher and you've got one that's really old, like 10, 20, 30 years old, it might be time to buy a new dishwasher because the technology has improved. they're quieter, they're cheaper to run. And in the long run, it's going to save you money if you've got a dishwasher that is, 2-3 times more efficient than your current dishwasher. Dishwashers are actually on the whole aren't that expensive. I think the one I bought was about £220 or something. And actually, it's probably half the price to run compared to the old one. And after a while, that just pays for itself, doesn't it? And I think actually a lot of us are guilty of that, of having a look at energy efficiency of certain products, because stuff is just, the technology is improving, it's got better. But then again, it's how you recycle these old things, and the components, can they be worn down, reused, blah blah blah. But that's a podcast for could be filling about another 15,000 podcasts.
Lee, I mean, we could have a whole podcast in itself just on this debate. So the upshot though is that those writers of the leaflet, the dishwasher guys, may have had a vested interest, but they were right. Right, that's it for this week. You keep up to date with all the latest breaking money news. Just go to thisismoney.co.uk or download the app. And if you have any comments or questions, team, anything you'd like them to look into, Lee.
Yeah, you can email us at editor@thisismoney.co.uk. If you've got any reader problems, things you want sorted, definitely message helen.crane@thisismoney.co.uk. You can tweet us at thisismoney. And you can also comment on the story where this lives. And if you're going to leave a review, let's get some just average reviews in there if you want. Just, this podcast is all right. Yeah.
I mean, we'd rather the good reviews, to be honest, but the 5 stars, because that would, it's nicer, isn't it? But, we'll take the 4. 4? Will you take 4? Anyway, if you do like our podcast, it is good if you rate us. The higher, the better. Thanks. It helps other people find us too.
Don't forget, you can stay on top of what's going on in the markets by tuning in to the Digest and Invest podcast by eToro. Go to your regular podcast platform and listen on the go. Digest and Invest by eToro, the podcast for those interested in trading and investing.